Hey guys, welcome to another video, and today I want to talk about two things: the current state of looting and the future of looting. Particularly because one thing is going to be implemented soon that could affect how we play the game we love, DayZ Standalone. Currently, looting spawn rates have definitely fallen. There's been a series of mini patches, no one's been necessarily quite sure what those are, and they're testing stuff on experimental at the moment. But it does definitely seem as if looting rates have dropped in the last few weeks. Now this has primarily affected rifles, guns, although pistols are still fairly common in game. It has even affected looting in land and in military bases. Whenever I've been to empty servers in these locations, there does seem to be less loot. Yet, it is also very specific. There are certain locations where you can find certain types of clothing, like up in the greenhouse in one of the rooms there. And for me, it kind of almost says that the looting system is damaged, and they're still obviously working on it. It's in development, as we all know, but there are some serious issues with the looting, and you'd think they had that sorted by now. But the thing that's going to change everything is that we have loot stashes coming to the game. You can see the image here on screen. It's something they've talked about for quite a long time, but it seems as if we're getting closer to getting this. What does it mean? Well, it definitely means that the preservation of loot would imply potentially a rarity to loot. Why introduce it into the game if they're going to up the amount of loot? It would seem as if this actual philosophy of stashing loot means that there's going to be less loot in game. That's how I personally view it. Now, there's already a fairly low level of loot compared to how it used to be in the past. It could mean that we're actually going to have a lot less loot in game. It'll also, obviously, mean that players are going to hoard their loot, and that large groups will probably grow in strength because of their numbers. They'll be able to hoard the loot together much more quickly than the lone wolf. If we look at the description for the hidden stash, as it's called, in the DayZ Trello board, it says that it will extend loot storage, which is good, so loot will stay in the game longer than, say, if it was left in a backpack or potentially even a barrel. It's going to be low profile, but it can be spotted, so these stashes can be spotted. But again, that's going to be very difficult because the map is massive, and we're going to find areas where we can put stuff people are never going to go. You may stumble across them by luck or fluke, but that's going to be very difficult. So that isn't really a selling point, that you can spot these stashes. It does say that you're going to need a container, some kind of tool, probably a spade, and the right type of surface. I don't know, that's probably just basically a flat area of land. There are certain conditions, but even so, everybody's going to have a stash, and everybody's going to be storing guns down. Guns, therefore, potentially going to be much harder to find, because there are only so many guns on every server. They won't keep spawning them in, and if a gun is in a stash, then surely that means it's going to be still registered on the server's list of loot. So they're going to become harder to find, and they are already becoming harder to find. Now, in a post-apocalyptic world, it would make sense that there's not a lot of loot around, especially seeing there aren't that many people, and they've probably moved out and taken their stuff with them, or turned into zombies. But there are maybe some ways around this. They could introduce craftable guns. I personally don't think this has too much of a place for DayZ. As a survivor, would you know how to craft a gun? I mean, I certainly wouldn't. If I suddenly found myself in a zombie apocalypse, I'd find it very difficult to make a gun out of items I've just found in houses. But one thing they really do need to work on is throwing, because I think, given the circumstances, and it looks as if there's going to be less loot, throwing a spear would be much more realistic and much more achievable. Or throwing knives or axes. They need to get that working. If they're going to start stripping the loot out, we need other mechanics that are going to make up for the projectile aspect that we're going to be robbed of by not having guns. They could introduce a locked up stash, which is part of the RP of the game, you know, the role-playing aspect. If you went to a police station and there was a lockup, it was padlocked and it was reinforced, you wouldn't necessarily be able to break into that with all the weapons. like a hoe or that type of thing, you'd need something a bit heavier, like a sledgehammer or a crowbar, and only those weapons could access those particular locations. It would increase the chances of finding loot in these hot spots, but also reduce this randomness of finding stuff just anywhere in game that probably in real life it wouldn't happen. There'd be particular locations like behind bars where you'd find a gun. And I think it's something you need to think about. They need to maybe add something alongside the stash so that we don't have a stripped back DayZ of loot, which will not encourage people to come and play the game. We're also in a situation where, by reducing the amount of guns in game, and I'm not actually saying they're going to do this, but it does seem to indicate that they are, the high-end points, the military bases, are going to become even more a focus for people. Stripping the towns and the cities and the areas that they're worried about the low activity, they're going to be even quieter, because it's going to be even harder to find guns in those locations, and there'll be even more reason for people to really focus on just playing the military aspect of DayZ Standalone. And DayZ Standalone isn't just about looting up in military gear. Originally, some of the principle, the theory of the game was to encourage combat in cities. Some of the best times that I personally have had have been in cities where large groups have been battling one another, but everybody's heading towards the military bases. And I can only think that stashes being introduced in the game will encourage this type of play. I don't know what you guys think, but they need to come out on this. They need to tell us a bit more about their philosophy behind how they're managing this looting system. There has been lots of talk in the past about how loot spawns into particular areas, but what is their philosophy? What are they trying to do? Where are they driving people? Be interesting to know. Be interesting to hear your thoughts. If you've got any comments, leave them down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.